that has been carried out by different committees. We have specific standards of how subtitle has to be with the quality, and for these subtitles to be useful for users. Also for audio description, there was a report on the accessibility to digital TV within this with a reference framework. There are rules for, well, of all types. One that I will always like to mention, because it's quite recent, is that of the quality of virtual training. This is a standard that includes different accessibility elements. We also have a management system for people that are working in organizations, in companies, so that they can have a reference document that states how things must be done in order to achieve this accessibility, so that it's not just something that appears because they happen to have it, but because it's a standard at a European level. We have also adopted certain rules, UNE rules, such as, for instance, the accessibility and electrical installation interfaces. That was a proposal by Spain and it was accepted. The first thing that one will need is to have a good electrical installation. If we don't start with things that are easy, you will have problems in order to achieve these wonderful, intelligent homes that we all want to live in. So as I said before, standards are developed with the participation of all the stakeholders. It is true that standardization is a voluntary task and it's not always very attractive, and what someone may think that will become a standard in a specific topic, then maybe the requirements will not be as interesting for a group of people as they were initially thought, and they can also leave certain groups of people unprotected. We also have public information processes in order to try to alleviate the situation, and in order for all the standards to have this information that is useful for all users. Within the European working framework, we in INGL, we carry out the Spanish standards, but from Europe we are also forced to adopt certain standards made in Europe, and because of that it's very important to participate in Europe. We cannot just stay in Spain and just wait for European standard to come to us with specific requirements. European standards have always had a special protection towards groups that may be excluded, for instance, of the information society. And for the last few years, they have launched mandates to certain bodies so that the technical standards do not exclude any user. Amongst them, we have had, as for example, the mandates of the year 1999, so that the standards took into consideration products and services that were being standardized and that were going to be used by the elderly or by people with disabilities. We have to think about who drafts these standards. If it's an expert in a specific area, or maybe he didn't have any type of contact with these people, they're not aware of people with disabilities. So what we are trying to do is trying to train those the people that create standards so that they know the requirements that we must include, so that just like the quality security standards, they also include other standards. So it is very important that within these European bodies of standardization, we need to have a presidency and the secretary of that body, for instance, responsible in the electrical part. We have to take into consideration also and include manufacturers of electrical materials in Spain, the secretary, and the work that we carry out in INGL. Another of the very important mandates that we have included was the accessibility to public purchases and accessibility to telecommunications and new technologies. When the administration the authorities go to purchase something, it must ask for accessibility requirements, and thus it will try to promote that those public purchases, just like whether they are environmental, they must also be accessible to all. For instance, from this body, the secretary of INGL, the secretary is once again INGL. That for the electrical part. For the non-electrical part is INGL. So Spain also has a very good standard in Europe, and they know that we are working very hard in order for technical standards to take into consideration everyone, and in a very near future, we also have another accessibility mandate for public purchases in the constructed or built environment. We're going to demand exactly the same, but take into consideration the needs that people may have in the built environment, including accessibility requirements, domotics, etc. We must repeat once again, thus, that, well, I don't want to go on too much about the details or go into the details of the mandate, but I would like to say that we have finished now the first stage on those regarding the ICT's field that were part of. We had to include different reports also of the European Commission, and the second stage will start this summer. We are going to create an accessible toolkit online, so that the people that so that the public authorities, when they purchase things, they have to know the requirements that they have to demand. Standards will be able to establish requirements, and if a manufacturer wants to comply by that and show that they are complying with this standard, they have to show it. Standards their aim is not to demand manufacturers to make an economical financial effort. The aim is so that when they design the product from the initial part of this chain, they must take into consideration all the solutions. Thus, regarding future European works, we will aim to continue working with people with disability and groups of people and the associations that represent them. We also want for their voice to be listened, both in Spain but in Europe, so that we can draft these standards that do not exclude anyone. And very recently also we have, and just in case this may be of interest for the conference, we have tried to standardize the curriculum regarding the universal design of ICTs. These are European projects that follow a very specific path over the last few years, and that will become standardized documents. To conclude, I would just like to say from INGL that the standardized part of this is open to all. We understand that the requirements for accessibility are as valid and as legally demandable as all others, and we believe that the standardization of products and services aimed to final users have to include requirements that then help people regardless of their capabilities. Thus, from INGL, we are trying to work in all of this, and we urge all the associations to make their voice be heard and to participate in all the standardization forums that, unfortunately, many of them are open activities, and thus it's quite difficult to participate and to be there in all our meetings. But we really believe that it's important for all standards to have requirements for all, and thus from the technological innovation for it to really help create products that do not exclude anyone. If you have any doubts on the standardization process or the work that we are carrying out at the moment, you can contact me and INGL.
Thank you, Tania. We're going to leave the floor now to the second paper in this panel discussion. To Tania's right, we have Francisco Javier González Lodoso. He is the Assistant Manager in Tecnalia, Salud y Calidad de Vida. He is industrial engineer. He has a postgraduate program in industrial management. He's been working since 2000 in Robotiker, a technological center, where he's been the manager of several projects for technology supporting development and non-dependence. And he has published a number of works, and he's involved in a number of social technology projects. In 2006, he was awarded the International Award of the ONCE. Francisco Javier will be talking to us about technology in the home, their minority use by people with disabilities and the elderly citizens, and how we should prepare for the future, bearing in mind that technology will be a prevailing factor in all of our homes. So without further ado, I leave the floor to Francisco Javier.
Hola, muy buenos días. Bueno, no sé, la ponencia.
Good afternoon. I think they still have to change my speech on the computer, but meanwhile, I will start. At any rate, I would like to start by thanking the ONCE Foundation for having invited us to be here today. Since the very beginning, in the first edition of this Congress, we have always been present. I would also like to thank ACEDON for inviting us to this panel, to CEDOM. And before starting, I would like to talk about Tecnalia. This is a technological center where there are 800 technological centers. There's more than 1,500 people, and our main focus is on this sector. And today I am representing the Health and Quality of Life unit, as Oscar was mentioning. Unfortunately, I think that we're not going to be able to see my presentation projected on the screen. Should I wait or should I continue?
Puedo hacer una pequeña introducción de lo que sería.
I will start with a short introduction of my speech. We will talk about the point of view of the users and how they undertake technology, its positioning, and the future along these lines. We did this through a survey with different sources, and we will also talk about the different technology ideas and how the market is from the very initial idea until it is created for the final user with all of the agents and all of the steps in the different process. And finally, we will talk about the design stage and how standards are very important when talking about accessibility and the different trends that we can see in research in the field of accessibility and ambient control. So this is like a summary of what I will be touching upon. Are we going to have my presentation projected?